right, sweet. Um, Jacob, how many guests do we have on? Let me get started first here.
That's 27 right now. So
7. All right, money. All right, fast forward, please. Here we go. Brandon, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Get you on there. Okay, sweet. Oh yeah, Devin, excellent rocking chair. All right, I'm not gonna be too loud.
Nothing but the best for the little man.
Definitely. All right, sweet. So don't want to take everyone's too much of your time today, but today definitely in for a treat. Welcome to the second session of our West Coast Development Series. This series is brought to you by the referees. However, we definitely try to incorporate and address the needs of all of our players, coaches, and staff from all the club levels, from high school all the way up to the top. So today we have Brandon Sparks, and we'll be talking about the professional environment as we kind of segue from our discussion last week with Kevin Battle, who kind of led us into a really good discussion regarding effective leadership. So this kind of is a really good transition to that, because the game is definitely going more professional. And our goals and ambitions as the referees is to get to that level as clearly displayed in MLR. So, without further ado, Brandon, thank you for coming. I was just read off a little excerpt from what I stole from the internet. But I knew Brandon back in the day when he was coaching at Cal, correct? With the women. I was coaching the ECSB. So then Brandon moved on to Detroit, where he kind of founded the Legacy Rugby Academy, which is a really good program. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. And then he, did you start with Seattle first?
Yes. The short answer to that is yes.
Very short answer. We're not going to talk about that too much, but with the MLR, he started with Seattle, and now he's pretty well involved with the Utah setup. So, Brandon, thank you. Welcome. Appreciate having you on. And let's dive into it. First things first, you want to give us a proper background of your rugby career so far, and how you got to this position?
I actually found rugby relatively young. I grew up for the first half of my life in beautiful inner city Detroit, Corktown. For anybody that's ever been over to Michigan there, back then it was ran mostly by the Irish mob and gangsters, where now it's overrun with coffee shops and skinny jeans. So it's a completely different environment than what I knew it as. Then from there, I actually found rugby when we moved to Traverse City. And for anybody that's been to Michigan or knows anybody from Michigan, this is the state of Michigan. Traverse City is way up here. And that's actually where I ran into a bunch of South African winemakers. And they started a whole community out there of rugby in the middle of nowhere, northern Michigan. Funny enough, that's where Phil Teal is from, myself is from, and now Angus McClellan, who is here at Utah. So it's a good source of pride for us Michiganders, Traverse City rugby and what's been produced from there. But I fell in love with the sport right away. I was all through high school and then briefly in college, I was a blocking tight end. So for anybody unfamiliar with that, that means that I was athletic enough to not be an offensive lineman, but too slow and uncoordinated to be a wide receiver. So I was essentially just a really skinny tackle. So it was nice to play a game where I got to carry the ball. I got to be more involved than what football allowed. From there, I went to college. I went to college long enough to be a doctor, and I got a teaching degree. Realized early on that college probably wasn't necessarily for me. So I built myself a little website and put game film up on there. Ended up convincing some foreigners to sign me and let me go overseas, and they gave me money to be there. Much to their surprise, I kind of knew what I was doing as an American, so I kind of bummed around for about, I don't know, 8 years, playing in different parts of the world and then different parts of the country. I've coached at almost every stop that I've been at, but it was only probably in the last 15 years that I started to take my coaching seriously as my athleticism and abilities ran out on the field. And yeah, I've been a professional rugby coach now. Well, I'm now more in an executive role here with Utah, but for going on about 8 years. I was with Seattle in year one. I signed a head coaching contract there, which was a very unique circumstance. I came to that role via Atavis, and yeah, so I've been around the MLR, been around USA Rugby, I've been around a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. So yeah, to keep it brief, that's kind of the backstory and how I've gotten here.
Excellent. Definitely. Because I know you've been around a whole lot. So I'll ask you this: what's one of the biggest differences that you can tell, like with the club setup, which most of us are a part of, and then that transition to being professional? That what do you see as the biggest jumps and hurdles or differences between the two?
Yeah, I'm going to be as honest and as transparent on this. And truth be told, there's a lot of overlap in the challenges that clubs have and we have. I am of the belief that the general public here thinks that, oh, you're a professional sports team, therefore it's like the NBA, the NFL, or NHL, where I always try to help people recalibrate their vision of what professional rugby is in America right now. And it's very much a startup. And what we mean by that is, if you ever worked in the startup environment, there's days that you can be the operations director, and then the next day you are the operations team. And that still applies heavily to the MLR. And it's not a bad thing. It's just where it is in the process and the way that's going to mature. The NFL went through it. The NBA went through it. The NHL is still kind of in it. So, I mean, with that being said, there is some differences. The people that I interact with on a daily basis bring a lot more professionalism than maybe we're used to at the club level. To date, I have yet to see anybody shoot the boot in a board meeting. So, that's one immediate difference right there that you can highlight. But yeah, it's just that professionalism. And, again, a lot of people believe that professionalism is a monetary title when really it's a mindset title. So, even like our scout teams who aren't compensated more than game tickets and, or our actual scouts that are compensated with game tickets, kit, and a few other incentives. We still look for those people that have that professional mindset, that carry themselves differently. So that would probably be the big difference, is just the mindset of the people involved in the day-to-day operations of this.
Yeah. And so what type of habits did you see yourself, I guess, and those you work with kind of take on, professionally, like coming from, from club to your academy set up to a professional organization? Like what different habits did you have to take on to be successful in that role?
Yeah, I kind of lucked out, in a previous life. I was upper mid-level management for a logistics company. And a lot of the skill sets that we had there, like they sunk something. I was doing the math the other day leading up for this, and it was something like $80,000 in the training for me alone, like sales training, administration training, business training, business coaches, all that kind of stuff. So, coming from that into rugby, gave me a lot of habits. Like organization is the big one. Creative problem solving, pretty much any buzzword that is a soft skill in business. I took a lot of time to work on, but I had people that coached me to be better at it, which, those habits allow me to create good processes that help us as a whole. Being from that startup environment before, I've got to be prepared. I have to be prepared to like understand that we have a limited amount of resources, but we have unlimited amounts of dreams. So finding those resources to get us as close to those goals and those dreams as we can takes a lot of patience, and requires me to be extremely comfortable with the failure process. But being able to like sift through the rubble of the failure process and find the things that I need to learn, and those small successes that when we try it again, we'll make it work. A good example of that is the current environment that we're in. Our state in Utah, we're pretty open right now. But when we're running youth clinics, running youth clinics during a pandemic is pretty challenging, and creating these protocols that protect both the staff as well as the players, and then like the people on the peripheral of that, families, parents, so on and so forth, was incredibly challenging. And we've learned some pretty significant lessons. Like this past fall, when we ran our development team, our MLR development team, we ended up having positive COVID cases show up. Again, none of it's come through, none of it came through like direct practice contact, but we had to learn how to manage it. We had to learn how to manage the players and their expectations around what they can do away from the team. Again, that's very much in a club setup. So making sure that we have those communication skills to set those expectations, to help everybody protect themselves from COVID, was probably one of the biggest challenges, and led to a ton of failures, but also led to us probably now being on the forefront of how we're going to handle COVID moving into this MLR season. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
I got a question. I'm Jacob Gonzalez. You talked about a bit of the mindset difference between being in the clubs and being in professional. So what are, I guess, some of the habits that you're finding that you had to kick in that transition to becoming a professional? And when we have these players coming in that they aren't from professional environments, and now they're thrown into being a professional, and they don't know how to be a professional because they've never done it. So like, what are those habits that you find that need to be gone to become a professional?
I mean, the greatest enemy in American rugby to progress is tradition. The culture of our sport, and the culture of the mindset of our sport we as a community, and I'll include myself, we as a community tend to attack anyone or any organization that wants to progress or be better. And we can all think of that 140-year-old. They're usually props, if we're honest. Let's be honest with ourselves. That usual 40-year-old prop that sees a 20-year-old kid that goes to the gym, takes himself seriously, doesn't get drunk at the post-match social, so on and so forth, that usually will ride that kid's butt the whole time, and be extremely critical of that guy. And again, you can see that with other organizations. I mean, imagine, Marquise, you probably had a few detractors when you were talking about organizing this. So, I mean, that mindset of like, oh no, this is how we've always done it, is something that we as a community need to do a better job of correcting. And once you start looking for it, it becomes very apparent, and you start to see it everywhere at an individual level for the players and their mindset. I mean, the first thing that we always look for, and the questions that we always ask the player directly, as well as the people that are surrounding that player, is if that player has a growth mindset. We know that any player, especially coming domestically, is going to lack a lot of things that are required to be a professional. But if they have a mindset that they want to get better and they want to ask questions, they want to be smarter about their processes, like, we can work with that. You know, what we found with a lot of these college kids as we were going through the draft process is they were often the biggest fishes in the smallest ponds, and they received the least amount of coaching because they were the best players. So, you know, there was kids all over this country that were fast, that would score 20 tries in a season, but they were just fast and they could run around slower, inexperienced players. But then when we started to challenge them, whether it be us putting them into an environment where the athletes are just as good, if not better than them, or we started asking about their weaknesses from the film that we saw, like, hey, why did you choose to tuck it here and not execute that 3-on-1 that you had? We often saw players become extremely defensive about those processes and their decisions, where the guys that we did end up drafting actually passed those things with flying colors, and we're honest, like, oh, you know, I didn't even think about that, I didn't see that, or oh, I didn't take my fitness seriously because I didn't have to, which, you know, showed us a bit of humility, but then their follow-up questions always showed a willingness to learn and get better. So, I mean, you know, I could sit here and talk about the skill set, you know, the lack of conditioning, the physicality, whatever, what have you, but all of those things are coachable. And it drives me nuts when you hear foreign coaches in this country just be like, oh, like, I remember I was talking to another coach leading up to the draft. I was like, hey, this kid here, you know, he's like the perfect size for a hooker, like grades out on our profiles as a 5'5", in his size and weight. You know, he could be an international hooker. And the coach was like, well, can he throw? And I was like, no, he's only played flanker. And the coach was like, then he won't be a hooker. And I just kind of looked at him and was like, well, what? Like, you're a coach him to throw the ball like a hooker. Like, it's not science, is it? Like, am I wrong? Am I the one that's difficult to work with here? So, I mean, really just using that growth mindset as a whole, and you'll see that awesome business buzzword of growth mindset show up in anything that I ever talk about. But yeah, for a player, it's just them being able to, like, learn.
Yeah, I think that's I don't want to throw my counterparts under the bus, but, you know, so our referees sometimes have mad traditions, like you said, and things have been done a certain way, like you said. And from my perspective, thank God that we have the MLR, because we able to see what happens when you put a lot of individuals together with that kind of mindset, you know, from each team. I wouldn't say there's one team that does it better than the other, but like there's a formulation, a conjunction of people, all towards growing and developing that product on the field. And I looked at that and, you know, what we're trying to do, essentially trying to mimic that. And part of reason why I asked you on is, you know, to pick your brain and how we can make our referees and our group of referees develop and provide them that type of environment, so we can, you know, get as good as we can be on the field, you know, which kind of takes us into our next little section. What is it like for those players day to day, for everyone who's not a referee? Of course, a lot of people in here are not referees, but just kind of take us through the day to day of what the athlete kind of expected to do, you know, being a professional.
Mm-hmm. And before I get into that, I want to preface this whole conversation with, like, I will be extremely critical of referees, but I also am a referee. I try to do 20 games a year to make up for my criticalness, because I can't, if all you're going to ever do is complain about something and then not do something to actively find a solution, then you're just wasting everybody's time. So understand that I will be critical, but I'm critical also because I do it. And trust me, I deal with jackasses like myself all the time as a referee. Like, I know I am a part of the problem as well. So I just want that to be out there before people are like, oh, he's just another, another rugby guy that's critical of referees. It's not the case with me. Like, I am actively trying to help change it and be a part of the solution. So with that being said, the big transition, the question was about transitioning from amateur to pro, correct?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
what's the environment set up? Day one, guy comes in with his backpack, to kind of take us through what's expected day to day.
Yeah. So there's actually a lot of things that lead up to day one, which is important. We do a lot of interviews with these guys. We assess their personalities, all of that stuff, to make sure that we know, once they do show up on day one, what's the best way to communicate to them, what's their goals, what's our goals for them, where we see them fitting into the team, so on and so forth. Every player here essentially knows that he's going to fit into one of three roles. One would be the star role. So a starter every day, somebody that rely on, gets heavy minutes. A role player, again, somebody that's pretty consistent and around the team, always inside that top 23, either on the bench or starting, and then a development player. So somebody that we know is going to take a year or two to get to where we want them to be either a role or a star player. So we set those expectations immediately. We go through all of our non-negotiables. Our non-negotiables are pretty easy. Show up, work hard, don't complain, and be a positive influence. After that, those three things pretty much cover any issues that we may have with a player. We also make them go through a biomechanical assessment with our S&C team. So we make sure we know what their weaknesses are. Matt drives me crazy, but Matt drives me crazy in a good way, because he is so technically focused and such an expert at what he does that, he'll come to me and be like, oh, hey, this one kid that we drafted, he's weak on his left side, specifically in his left quadricep. I'm like, that's great, Matt. Make it strong. It's not really my issue. You know what it is. Let's get it done. So, those kind of things all lead up to day one. So when day one comes, when they show up, we still are one of the very few teams, and this will be the last year that we're operating like it, that trains during the evening, because we still have a core group of guys that we depend on that do carry daytime jobs. So they'll show up in the evening. They'll usually get their training table meals. They'll go through the medical treatments. Meetings, we alternate meetings between weight rooms and one group. So the forwards will be in the weight room while the backs are in the meeting room, and then they flip, and then they do a team session, and they're out the door. There's a lot of feedback from the coaches with those players. Here we're very analytically driven. We use data, our own data, as well as data provided to us, to help make sure that these players are staying up to date on their performance, and where we see them needing to perform better, and where they're performing well at. So yeah, that's usually what their day-to-day will look like. A pretty generic, show up, lift weights, play a little bit of rugby, let's talk about rugby, and then go home, a schedule.
Yeah. And for the coaching staff themselves, where did you guys learn to get the data and all of that stuff, the analytical piece? Like, who's the guru, or what is that process for the team to say, like, hey, let's find the best way to do this, or let's look at how are we going to track these behaviors, or like what does that look like, as far as like providing that environment for growth for the players from the perspective of the administration.
Mm-hmm. If Kevin Battle is still on the call,
yes,
we only use Facebook. We use Facebook and simple tally marks, the old T-graph, good, bad. That's it, Kevin. That's it. Turn it off. There's nothing else to hear. Nothing else what I'm about to say is going to be of any importance to any other teams out there in the MLR. No, all kidding aside, we start, we designate our KPIs. So like one of our KPIs is the ability to create collisions, both in attack and defense. So we spend a lot of time looking at that. One thing that we believe is that, a tackle isn't the completion to a player getting the ground. That's a byproduct of it. our collisions are what happens before the actual impact takes place. So where the shoulder placement is, what the player has done to move the defender if they're the ball carrier, or what the defender has done to control the attack if they're trying to make the tackle, the leg drive, the point of contact, all that kind of stuff we look at through our sports code, and then our analysts, as well as we have an army of interns that work for us. Our analysts and all that stuff break that stuff out. We work with a really great data management company that then puts it all into colorful graphs that simple minds like Chris Latham and I can look at and understand. Green is good, red is bad. And then from there, we then take that and we produce it down into a very simple one sheet for the players to look at. And then those players are often followed up with the data that they have in hand through just simple one-on-ones and questions and answers. And it's stuff that we work to recreate every week, so they can see the track of progression. One thing that we do a really good job of, don't kid yourself, coaching is not a place for great ideas that suddenly take everything over. Coaching is nothing more than taking something from somebody else and then tailoring it to your needs. We always borrow things from American football. Like we have one of those awesome little stat graphs that American football has that we can hang on the wall and say, like, player A did a good job. Boom, he's got a good green X in there because he did his job. So we try to attack it in every different way. So the players, if a player learns visually, that data board is really good for them. If a player is very analytical, those spreadsheets are very good for them. If a player is a visual learner, when we will break out what they need to do in film, we just try to tackle it from every angle. We do a lot of it. We produce a lot of it in-house, but as well as use Stats. We have a partnership with Stats Sports that also gives us a great feedback in forms of graphs and data and all of that.
Yeah, that's great. As a referee yourself, quick question, and how do you? Luckily, we have a system called Advantage that most of our referees has used, where we kind of go in and code the game and write the little reports and kind of track that. Where do you see the analysis piece fitting in as far as referee development as a professional? I don't know what the NFL does. I don't know what the true professional organizations do at that top level. But where could you see it possibly seeping into the refereeing side of this?
Everybody has tendencies. So we actually scout referees as well too. So by the time that whistle's blown, we know what those referees are likely to call. A good example of that, and there's the data exists in the public forum, but Rasta from the 7 series is highly unlikely to call penalties in the last 2 minutes of any Sevens game. So like those types of data points are important to us competitively, to use to our advantage. There's always outliers. There's always outliers in any organization and any referee. How I see referees using that is, and keep in mind too, like it's great that we have analysts and interns and software and all that stuff, but at the grassroots level, at the club level, you don't need all that stuff. Like all you need is a cell phone or a handheld video camera, and then you just make yourself a nice little T-graph, and you say, here's how many offsides I call, how many penalties of the breakdown I call, and all of that, and then you can just do a simple tally. And then go back and look at those tallies and be like, oh, was that good? Was that bad? And start to assess it from there. One issue that I've had with referees at the club level is their lack of desire to use advantage. I'm not sure why that is. But if you're refereeing a high school game, advantage should be your best friend for the sake of letting those kids play and not turning it into an American football match or just, scrum, line out, so on and so forth. So I think referees using data, it should be extremely important. one feature, oh God, what is it? It's Titan. I believe it's Titan GPS. So like Titan GPS, I can't remember. I'm upset that I can't remember what it was, but there was one that we were looking at. But Titan GPS is a $250 unit that you can get tuck into the back of your shirt, just like any player. But it gives you a heat map of where your movement is. So you'll have the rectangle of the rugby field, and you can actually see where you move in relation to the actual game being played, where your stop starts are, your accelerations, decels, all of that kind of stuff. And like now that's $250. It's relatively accessible for most referees. I mean, I mean, referees are getting paid pretty well nowadays. Isn't that like 3 games? So, like that's a sevens tournament. I don't know what it is, but like those kind of like that kind of data, I think is extremely important, but at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I see referees, and once I make this point, I'll get off my soapbox. The biggest thing that I see is like referees dedicating themselves to the fitness, because it doesn't matter what you're calling it doesn't matter what data that's being provided. If you're not in the position to see it or make the call, it's all a moot point. So like, I guess if you're going to keep track of any data as a referee, I would say keep track of your fitness scores, whether it be with a GPS unit or when you can see like, oh, like I am getting fitter every game, or a simple stopwatch. So yeah, I see that data being extremely useful to referees, and I think that they should engage in it. And again, it doesn't have to be advantage. It can be as simple as watching yourself and just using the old tick tick slash and calling it good.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was going to bring this up later in the chat, but so you guys have strength and conditioning coaches, all of that bells and whistles kind of thing. Do you see one day, kind of partnering up with the referees and providing, training schedules for them? Because I mean, a lot of referees at your game, it's like, it's great that we made it to that level and, get to AR or referee, but there aren't too many strength and conditioning coaches for the referees. So can we, do you see one day kind of tapping into, the MLR's resources as far as like, like, hey, this is what we provide our players as far as strength and conditioning and routines, like you guys are more than welcome to follow that, or is that something that we got to pay for? I mean, not pay for.
It's funny. It's fun. No, it's funny that you mentioned this. And I apologize if you guys have heard me talk about this. We should always look at our game. We should always look at our game as like a triangle. So at the tip of the triangle are the players, and then the two bases are the referees and then the coaches. If one of those bases fail, the entire thing collapsed. Then nobody's successful. And right now, there's all this money, time, energy being pumped into coach development and resources and so on and so forth. And those referees are getting left behind. And how that impacts my job as a director of rugby here in Utah is like, I see it every day. Because guess what? If the game isn't called consistently, if the game isn't called correctly, it now hurts the development of the coaches and the players. So when I go out and like our goal here is to try to make the Utah Warriors 70% domestic in the next 5 years. Like that's our goal. That's what we want to do. But if these referees aren't being given the resources to be successful, to help these players grow and get better, the same with the coaches, my job becomes a whole lot harder, and then my job fails. So to combat that, we are starting a whole bunch of academy programs. Our 3-year goal, by the time that I've been here, but 2023, I want to be able to have a select group of referees that are in the Utah region that we can work with. Khalil is somebody who we've identified. I think Khalil, you're on the call. He has a standing invite to come out and work with our team whenever he wants, and us give them feedback. How I envision our academy going is a little bit different than how I believe referee is done in the U.S. as a whole. There's a bit of a contentious relationship between coach and ref. I would love to debate that if anybody disagrees, but I think if there's anything that we agree on in this call, it's that, where, truth be told, truth be told, there needs to be a feedback loop there, and it's extremely important. One thing that we want to put into place is what we call a 48-hour feedback rule. So the coach isn't allowed to give a referee feedback, until 48 hours after the match. The coach also has to do an assessment inside of the referee assessment of him and his team. Why it's great to be able to blame the coach or blame the referee. Coaching is just as much of an issue in the game as it is the referee. So like there needs to be some self-reflection by the coaches about why the referee was calling certain things as what it was. But that's our big difference, is we want to include the coaches in the referee evaluations and the assessment. I can tell you from my years of being a club coach at the USA level, that was extremely lacking. And I can tell you that at the MLR level, it was also a lacking. I think the new group that we have coming in, that will not be the case. And they seem very proactive about it. But yeah, I mean, we want to get there. We want to get there by 2023. And we want to include referees, because referees are crucial to the development of the sport and the game here in the US.
Yeah, excellent. I couldn't agree with you more. So, whenever I'm in Utah, I'm gonna hit you up, see if I go to a game.
Please.
Definitely. So the next kind of segment we want to just kind of get some insights on is kind of like the ethics and the characters and values of both the organization. And you kind of mentioned it with the goals of hitting about 70% domestic players. So the question I have about that, like, what are, and you kind of mentioned it with the non-negotiables, so what are some of the characteristics or the values that the organization share, and also of what you hope, each player kind of takes on within the team?
Yeah. So does anybody here know the significance of the 4 stripes on our kit?
Probably not.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know about it until I got hired here, but if you see on the sweatshirt, you see that there's 4 stripes associated with anything that we wear or branded, and that pretty much is what we use to drive our organization. It's pretty easy. It's family, tradition, respect, and community. So those four core values are what drives us in anything that we do. If anybody's watched the recent Tottenham Hotspurs on Amazon, what is that? Anyway, there's one thing in there where all the first team players are required to do community activations, and that's the same thing that we have here. Again, honoring one of those 4 stripes. So anything that we do, we make our expectations of any players that we sign or any coaches, pathway, MLR, it doesn't matter. They need to know that those 4 things are what's going to drive us forward, and they're expected to honor those 4 things no matter what. There's only been a few times that we've had players opt out and be like, oh, I'm really not interested in that type of thing. But for the most part, everybody's on board. But those 4 stripes are the anchor of anything that we do, whether it be, hey, who are we going to sign, to, hey, what community events are we going to do, to how are we going to approach this public appearance with our coaches in the kickoff event for the MLR. We look for those types of things, and they're just, those things are non-negotiables for us. And giving you an example of that is that the family one of the, when we went through the review process leading up to the draft, we spent a lot of time looking at the players' families, but then also the players' views on families, and how they played the role in their success, their failures, and then how they would bring that family approach to our game. And we have a mini camp happening this week. It's a continuation of what was happening last week, but some of those young guys that we've identified that really represented those 4 stripes the best are now becoming our leaders, amongst the whole team, not just the foreign guys or domestic guys. They're just separating themselves. So I think those 4 things are non-negotiables, and everything, and it's used in everything that we do to drive us forward.
Yeah, one thing that I do definitely notice is the Warriors as an organization is incredibly diverse. And as always, from my very small perspective, I don't know if that was a conscious decision or just, um, how does the organization like attract so many diverse people to it? It's kind of odd question, but you,
I don't think
you
it's odd. No,
uh,
no. I mean, I think a lot of that credit needs to just go to Kimball. Like Kimball Care is one driving this, and you know, credit be to Kimball. He just looks for the best people no matter what, and and like I think that's. I mean, I'm patting myself on the back. That's how I think I came to come here. Like that's how Vaha is here now, and all of these players. It is a very diverse group that has a ton of different paths to this organization, but like the common ground that we always settle on is like we're trying to build a tradition, that's community and family based out of respect, and like as long as anybody shares those values, like they're immediately included in what we're doing because it's that important for us to be successful. I mean, guys, I'm wearing sweatpants right now. I have no interest in ever getting a job where I have to wear real pants ever again. Like I like this, and like we're all gonna buy in and do whatever we got to do to keep this train moving forward. Especially like in the role, like I mean, I'm one of only 3 Americans in this league in a decision-making role at the moment, and like I understand that my success, is going to create opportunities for other Americans and hopefully get us past this worldview that people have with American rugby people that we're a bunch of knuckle dragging morons, because we have American football here. And, working with people like Chris Latham or Vaha or anybody like that, like helps create that needed diverse feedback loop for all of us, including myself, to be successful. It's a bit of a ramble. I hope that was the answer that you were semi looking for.
no, it's a topic that I guess in this today's climate, you got to tread very lightly because you don't want to say the wrong thing. But I definitely find that, especially as you said, decision making roles it's very tough to come by, especially at the higher levels in MLR. Maybe it's due to like the lack of resume that Americans tend not to have, and when competing against All Blacks or whoever comes from whatever other organization. So how would you and I think you stated before you guys got a lot of interns. Like how do you promote more, I guess, leadership opportunities from the wider community that's not traditionally given those chances?
Oof. I mean, so hold on. Let me see if I can. I mean, it is a bit of a tough question, like how to promote. I mean, if we find somebody that we feel strongly about, we're going to do whatever we possibly can to get those people involved. Like so we have a scouting network. Again, Kevin Battle, make sure you mute this. We have this beautiful scouting network that has men and women all over the country that work to go out and watch club games and look for it. One of those types of people was Derek Smith, who was, an Eagle, was a USA Eagle for a brief second there, and then has kind of settled where now he's our lead pathway coach. We found that he really embodied what we wanted in the regards of analytically driven, growth mindset, all of that. So like we found a way to include him and get him involved in this. We realize as the Utah Warriors, and I don't know if I'm only speaking for the Utah Warriors, we realize that the MLR is in a great position to provide opportunities for rugby people to progress. Up to 4 years ago, those opportunities were only provided by USA Rugby, where now those opportunities isn't just USA Rugby, it's the MLR. And now you're seeing more varsity programs come involved. Well, guess what? I was on the phone with the AD for one of the colleges that just launched their new program months ago, talking about that kind of stuff. So, like, us personally, we're always asking questions. We're holding a camp. We're holding a camp out in West Virginia in the summer, and one of the first questions I asked was of the camp coordinator was, what coaches are in the area that deserve an opportunity to be seen and work with a different group of coaches. And she gave me a list, and now we've invited those coaches to be involved. So I mean, we're a little bit more unique in the regards that we actively go out and try to find those people. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. And I think a lot of people on this call are in positions of leadership, and we all have and we kind of spoke about it last week. It's tough to get those at bats, within our positions, because I mean, the rugby is a world that we competing with, for those jobs. It's not just, the guy in California or a couple guys who graduated UCLA that we competing with. When a rugby position open up, from the refereeing side, managing to even, administratively, like we competing with the world as far as like resumes are concerned. That was just a bit of a tangent, but the reason why I asked that is because, once again, like if we are to see ourselves from the refereeing side becoming more professional, I look at it as we have to do that across the board in every single position. And so getting the opportunity to lead in different roles and responsibilities is super important for me, and as well as to provide the chance for all our constituents to one day, compete with those, around the world, if that kind of makes sense.
No, and that does make sense. And that kind of like refines that refines that question a little bit more. It's like, I mean, I interviewed for 5 different jobs at the MLR level after I was gone from Seattle. And the consistent feedback I kept getting was just, your content's great, your policies are great, all that stuff is great. We just feel the optics would be better with a foreign coach involved, which, that's each ownership's opinion and matter, and I'm okay with that. But one thing that I did find that started to make things a little bit easier for me, and is it okay if I share my screen for a second?
Absolutely.
Can I do that?
Yep. Let me stop share first.
So this is something that actually I stole from he's a friend of mine. At the time, he was a quarterback coach at the University of Michigan. He actually now was the special teams coach at Vanderbilt, where Sarah Fuller ended up kicking in the first FBS bowl game. But what he, for whatever reason, it won't let me share. It says host is disabled.
Oops, hold on, let me
that makes sense.
let me let me see here.
But one thing that he said was building out a portfolio, which, like, my resume, again, patting myself on the back, I believe is fairly impressive with like what I've done in business, but like I needed to create something that I think would translate to rugby and talk about the mission in a way that information is consumed now, which is like with art, craft, like that's the reason why Instagram is outgrowing Facebook every day. It's because of the content you can create and share on there, which you can all see this now, right?
Yep.
So like all I did was just go through and created what was essentially like my portfolio. It has everything from my career highlights, my summary of who I was, my playing experience, what I envisioned the yearly outcomes would be for the organization. Like we did everything all the way down to like we use something very similar to what the NFL used with the letter grades for the players, like how we were going to identify talent, our player profiles, how we were going to ID, all of this stuff was just laid out, and again, like all of us has probably done something very similar to this all of us have probably done something very similar to this, you know, for school, for our own careers, for anything like that. But it, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to translate well into our coaching or our refereeing. You know, like referees could easily have put something like that together with whatever data that they're able to find on themselves or whatever the data they create for themselves. You know, the same for administrators. Like, I mean, some of you probably looked at it and went, "Oh, that's a great idea," but again, it's just a great idea simply because you've already done it. I know you've already done it. You just haven't necessarily applied it to your rugby, which, you know, we might lack rugby expertise according to the world, but what we do not lack is the expertise of sports science and business. And the more that we can use that and incorporate that into how we promote ourselves to potential employers, it is only going to make us more successful as a community in professional and international rugby.
Yes. Speaking of the community piece, like how do you see us with the MLR working best with the local unions, and what type of support from the union perspective? Right here in Southern California, we got SCARFU, which is great. But how do you see the unions in the MLR or other teams and different teams kind of collaborating to provide the best for each other?
Okay. Who here saw our selects games? Did anybody see our select schedule? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like the MPD, the MPD All-Stars, which was essentially all of the best players from the region that we did not select to the Warrior selects. There's a lot of selects in that statement. You know, that is what I would love to see us as a community go back to for player representation, because our Utah Warrior selects are essentially our MLR development team, where, you know, we were able to bring out the Northeast Academy. I know that I talked to people in Southern California about coming out here and playing us. But like bringing back those all-star teams, I think will help benefit everybody as a whole. It gives coaches opportunities to coach a different group of players, a dedicated group of players. It gives referees an opportunity to referee games that will be more skilled and more organized. It gives players an opportunity to dip their toe into the high performance world of professional rugby. All of those types of things can help. You know, like with our referees, we made sure to share them the film. You know, those types of things, because we know that they're not probably getting that resource in most of the other games that they do. So that's how I would see the unions engaging. The other thing is like, you know, one thing that I found not just here in Utah, but anywhere that I've worked at is I've taken it to calling kingdom syndrome. So people in rugby have worked so hard to build their youth club, their men's club, their women's club, whatever it is, that you know, it's so important to them that they've built these high walls around it. And anything that's progressive or any new ideas that's not their own are perceived as a threat. And suddenly those walls get a little bit higher and a little bit higher and a little bit higher. You know, we're dealing with that a lot at the community level, where people see us as like the other day I went to an SYO and I said, hey, listen, you know, our coaches would love to do just a free webinar with your community coaches or with your coaches. Would you guys be interested? And they refused to do it because it wasn't their idea. So like us getting past that kingdom syndrome of these unions, like some, you know, there's some administrators that have been in a charge of a union from almost 20 years, where it's so important for them to be the sole source of knowledge and progress, that those opportunities go wasted. Where us as the community members in that, we need to understand that if we're paying dues into a team, an organization, or a governing body, we are by de facto shareholders. And if you've ever had shares in a business, you know that you have a say in anything that you do. And if you don't have a say, guess what you do? You pull your investment and you go somewhere else that does. So I think it's important that like we engage just as a whole in creating in creating opportunities for us to grow, but us as like the everyday people that are still on the ground, refereeing games, playing games, coaching games, understand that we have an incredible amount of power to dictate where our unions and governing bodies go, because without us, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree with that more. Usually we try to lobby for different things over here, but I think just establishing that team, and everyone working as individual, I mean, working together collectively for that common purpose definitely allows for an easier opportunity for those things to take place. Speaking of which, we actually have a community kind of organizer slash activist slash all of that good stuff. Dr. Motley on. Dr. Motley, can you hear me?
Hey there, yes. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Perfect. She runs the Ruggers for Justice group, which is kind of a group dedicated towards providing equity and accessibility for players all around. Actually, Dr. Motley, do you want to explain your group real quick?
Sure. So you were doing a great job. And to add on to what Marquise had mentioned, Ruggers for Justice is a grassroots organization, or let me say this, it's a grassroots movement that started in 2016 from consistently continuous markers throughout history and currently in society that continue to show that rugby players and athletes and ruggers alike were missing and needed as a key shaper of social progress. And essentially what we are is we're a group that firmly believes that regardless of background, identity, accessibility, especially for minoritized players, every rugger deserves a high quality of life, both on the pitch and off the pitch. And so I've really enjoyed listening to you, Brandon, talk about, some of the breakthroughs as well as the challenges that you all have experienced. And one of the first things that you mentioned was, and I jotted this down, is that more of the ineffective traditions we have will yield continued more ineffective solutions and outcomes. And same with that kind of kingdom complex, right? If I didn't do it, the connection to the positionality and the power versus we need to keep in mind that there's a larger thing to this. Although rugby is still considered an emerging sport in the United States, we are progressively growing. Rugby is now to the point where it is becoming a lifeline for folks. It is getting people out of poverty. It is providing folks an opportunity to go to college, to community college, to four-year institutions. It's allotting an opportunity for folks to travel the world, to develop into the best part that they can be. And there's so many things, Brendan, that you mentioned and so many great questions, Marquise, that you posed. And it goes back to something very similar that Brandon just mentioned at the very end. We've got to start baking some of this into the way we just do rugby. Not as an afterthought, not as when the shit hits the fan, but as an imperative part in the way that we do rugby so that we can provide a high quality experience domestically and then keep that in mind when we're competing internationally. And so where I think our worlds can kind of collide, Marquise and Brandon, for everyone else on the call, so excited to be a part of this, is that I think the work that we do really matches well with what Brandon does and what other folks are doing, is because having a high social justice and equity IQ and ethics is critical to the psychological and mental health environment that teams and athletes perform in. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here because I know there's refs, there's coaches, there's managers, there's admins. So it's no secret that there is a significant amount of empirical evidence that continues to show how important both physical and psychological climate and environment are to high athletic performance. So when we talk about equity, when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about recruitment, when we talk about retainment, it has a twofold benefit. Internally, again, it better psychological environment that's co-created by athletes, managers, coaches, refs, so forth and so forth, significantly, and when I say significantly, statistically significant, I mean, we can go, as Brandon, we can go back to data from both lived experience, practice-based evidence, and research to show that that psychological environment significantly shapes the opportunities and the manner in which athletes are able to develop their highest quality athletic performance. And that's for a few reasons. Because when I can actually show up in a space and I feel valued, there's trust, I'm not worried about navigating microaggressions that then affect my productivity. And I think, as Brandon mentioned, something important, you can have the best technical skills in the world, but if you can't cultivate a team, when it's time for it, you're not going to make the cut. So all of those things contribute to individual and collective performance. And then the external benefits are, let's be clear, sports has always been a catalyst for change, for social progress. We are beings. We don't leave what's happening in society and then come to the pitch and come to practice and come to our organizations and just leave those things behind. So where we are, rugby has and has always had a critical ethical question, which is, are we going to be the mirror of the bullshit in society that prevents our athletes, our refs, our coaches, our admin from having the highest quality of life that we should, especially for minoritized people? Or are we going to be the trailblazers to do something different? And we can start by first creating a shared vision, as Brandon mentioned, and Marquise, as you've mentioned, and the work that you all are doing, a shared vision that every rugger deserves to have a high quality opportunity and lived experience. And you can start to create intrinsic motivation. Let me be clear. If you have people in your organization or in your team that don't want to play rugby because they can't sing the N-word in a rap song as a part of the team warm-up, they're not playing rugby for the right reasons. We don't need them, right? And if there's not a willingness to learn to do something different, it's holding our culture back. It's holding us back. And so I'll end with that and saying, I know a lot of times, and I know, Brandon, I heard you say it, is a lot of times this is considered fluff and this is considered soft. It's considered things that really don't make a difference. But time and time again, you'll see there's several case studies about the All Blacks, and the All Blacks have done a significant investment in some of the things that Brandon has been talking about: psychological environment, intrinsic value, ethics, morals. We see it in our top Fortune 500 companies. It's not a secret, okay? And so we have an opportunity to merge these things together. So again, ethics is not soft. What Brandon is talking about is not soft. It is an imperative, proactive way of ensuring we are providing the highest quality experience for people that are paying money and taking time out of their schedule to contribute to something amazing. That's all I got for that, Marquise.
Well, sometimes, Dr. Molly, you leave me lost for words. It's a lot to unpack in there, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, Marquise, I have a question to follow that, actually, to take the words out of your mouth. So, Dr. Molly, you just said a lot of things about ethics, and Brandon, I kind of want to put this question towards you, but I guess, how has the responsibility of changing the game fallen on you guys as far as raising the level of the game, gaining more fans for the game, versus, probably before, from an outsider's perspective and being a professional team, we probably thought that your job was just to win games and win a championship. And how has that responsibility fallen upon you guys to, like I said, change the game as a whole?
I don't necessarily think that's fallen upon us. And I mean, I'm not picking on that choice of words, but I think I know it's a baton that we've chosen to pick up and carry ourselves. Our overall goal here at the Utah Warriors is to be the epicenter of rugby in America. And with that episode, it's easy to say that. It really is. It really is easy to say, like, oh, we want to be the biggest and the best. But there's a lot that goes into that, a whole athlete approach. We spend a lot of time with these athletes making sure that we're not worried just about the rugby, but we're worried about them as the individual. I mean, we always make sure that they can answer at least yes to two of the three big questions, which is, do you feel fulfilled professionally? Do you feel fulfilled in your interpersonal relationships? And then, are you sleeping well? So like those three questions essentially if you can say yes to two of those three questions, that's great. If you can do all three, that's perfect. But those three questions can encapsulate any issue that you have with an athlete or a player. So like, we've chosen to pick that up and do it the right way. And, we're going to make mistakes, and we know that we're going to make mistakes, both socially and professionally, in game development, so on and so forth. But there's nobody here that has such a big ego that we're not prepared to stop and be like, all right, what can we do better? How can we talk to people to get better? I mean, if anybody's familiar, but ForPass is a Belgium-based company, but it's essentially, they're in charge of overseeing the pathway development and auditing each pathway for its efficiencies for the EPL, for La Liga, for MLS. There's a bunch of other big-time soccer leagues that they're in charge of. Well, the great thing is the guy who's actually the director here at the RSL Academy used to be the director for ForPass. So guess who gets taken out to dinner at least once a month for me to pick his brain about how we can do this stuff? It's him. So like, it's not falling upon us. If you really want to break it down at its most basic human level, we're all essentially some kind of disenfranchised rugby person that we're now in a situation where we can do it how we feel is the right way. And like, that's just one of my jobs. But if I'm honest, that's if I'm remembered for anything, I want to be remembered for doing that part of my job the best to my ability, and in a way that it helps other people that were like me, that had the same dreams as I did, get to where they want to be.
I think that's a perfect way to not to end, but essentially wrap things up, because I don't want to take too much of your time, Brandon. As you told us all, like, you incredibly busy, but I think with that, like, you definitely an inspiration to us all, and an inspiration for our individual organizations and collectively throughout the West Coast to really bring some of those values. Last week we spoke about our values as an organization, which we hope to adopt. And so hearing those things kind of really helps us shape the approach and the things that we want to take on. So ultimately, like, we just as well respected and professional as the Utah Warriors and yourself. I would open up this section to a couple general Q&A. So if you do have a question for Brandon before we depart, just go ahead, take yourself off of mute and go ahead and ask.
Yeah, this is Durward. I just have a quick question. So I got into rugby probably 6 years ago, to coaching, and loved it, and then got onto the men's team. So I've just really, really loved it. The youth rugby here has grown tremendously. It's really our focus is to create the path from youth to maybe even college to men's, and then those that want to go on and do the other as well. What I'm curious of, I know that you can only really speak for Utah, but I'm just curious from the MLR as a whole, do they have a real focus as a group of teams that are looking to really promote the youth rugby and really kind of do it together nationally as well? Or is each team kind of doing their own little thing? You were talking about silos, so I was just curious if that's siloed or if that's something that they're looking at as a whole.
Yeah, we are looking at it the whole, and the league was actually, credit to them. They're really smart about this. So we actually have salary cap incentives for doing youth initiatives. where that I mean, if we're honest, that shouldn't be the whole reason why you do it. But for some organizations that are maybe a little bit more international talent dependent, it does cause them a moment of thought to be like, oh, maybe we should do this youth stuff for the benefit of our salary cap. Here it was always part of what we were doing and what we do. We have a program called the Junior Warriors that we actually take a lot of time in. We understand from again using that FORPASS resource, like where youth athletes and youth programs often fail is how it's coached. So we spend a lot of time educating our coaches on how to coach the game. We use an acronym called FUN because sports loves acronyms. And, and FUN, just F stands for fundamentals, U is for understanding, and N is for now play. And inside of that acronym, 80% of your practice should be spent in the now play phase. And then 10, you can break up the last 20 however you want in the understanding and fundamental phase. But ultimately, the game, for the success of any youth rugby organization, the players should be spending the most time of their time together in the act of play. So that's kind of how we approach it. But as a league, we are also financially incentivized to get involved in youth rugby and do some kind of activation around it.
Thank you.
Hey, quickly, Brendan. Hi, Nick Racono here. I just had a question about your assessment of communication types that you were talking about giving your players. Mm-hmm. Is there a certain assessment that you guys use, and is it sports specific, or is it just more of something that you would have brought from your corporate?
Yeah, we used to do. Yeah, the model that I have, I used it. I for the sake of competitive advantage, I won't say what it is, unfortunately, but if you just Google personality assessment test, you'll see it near the top. They have like free versions of it. So yeah, I brought that over, when we used to hire employees, we would make every employee do that. And it's something that I believe we should all do at this level as well too. And again, there's free resources out there. And it is oftentimes beneficial to the players because a lot of players will be like, oh, like I didn't realize that I was a visual learner. I always thought that I was, a doer. But yeah, like that kind of stuff is out there and it's free.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Did I put everybody to sleep? I apologize.
No worries.
If my rants and soapboxing was that bad.
No, I think it was excellently and beautifully said. All the points you brought up, and definitely thank you for giving us some insights into what it's like for the professional athletes, and then more importantly, what it's like for the administration and everyone, creating that environment for those athletes to train and perform in. It's something that we definitely hope in the process of doing for our West Coast referees, and as well as, branching it out to everyone else. But just like you said, for the sake of being a competitively advantaged, we trying to make our referees the best in the West, best in the country. So we trying to do anything we can to get them up to that level. So, with that said, definitely thank you and appreciate your time. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you on the pitch, hopefully soon. And appreciate it.
Yeah, just so you guys, I actually just wrote down free S&C for refs. So that I have a meeting with the staff tomorrow. So I might have one of the interns work with our lead S&C coach to see if we can't get something free out for referees by the end of the winter. So yeah, guys, I mean, yeah, thanks for having me. Like this stuff is like inspiring in the regards of like, it makes me want to work harder, but like hearing the struggles and things that you guys go through as a community allows me to kind of recalibrate our organization towards making sure that we're helping you guys as a whole, because, the truth is we could go off and rip 5 championships easy the next 5 years, but if we don't have buy-in and support from you, it's all for naught. So yeah, thank you for keeping my motor going, and I've appreciated this, and thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Until next weekend, we'll have this available soon. I'll send that out. But I think I'm getting a lot of thanks from everyone and appreciations. But we'll get that video out to you guys so you can refer back to it. And then also next week, we have Molly Martin and Devin O'Crump presenting on strength and conditioning, actually. Devin was Olympian. Molly's worked at the national level, and so it should be good. Hopefully we get a little insights on how to get in shape, but appreciate it. Thank you to everyone, and see you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Marquise. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, guys.
Well,
Thank you.
My referee group: Austin, Jacob, Rosalind, probably Nick. Who else is on here? And Tig, if you guys don't mind staying on for a hot sec, just a minute or two. The room to clear out. Participants. Is that everyone? All right, I'm going to stop this recording.